Okay, I think we're going to get started. So welcome to my talk. This is Overcoming Analysis Paralysis, Experimenting in Bears versus Art. My name's Luke Muscat. Up until about 2 days ago, I was the Chief Creative Officer at Halfbrick Studios. I've actually moved on to do different things now. But while I was at Halfbrick Studios, I made a whole bunch of games. Fruit Ninja, Jetpack Joyride, Fish Out of Water, Monster Dash, and a game that's currently in soft launch, Bears vs. Art. Of course, these games aren't made just by me. There's a whole team behind that, so this is my excellent team at Halfbrick, the Ninja Pack. Looking very good in that very photogenic photo. So yeah, first of all, let me just thank everyone for coming to a talk about analytics. I know analytics isn't the super sexiest subject in the world. People aren't going to go wild. It's not a talk about how to make an indie game on a yacht in the Caribbean or whatever. But I'm a designer. I'm not actually a business type person. I'm not an analyst. I design games, and I'm not even good at maths, really. So this talk is more about the tension between design and using analytics and how you can overcome that. So we're going to be going through a few things. Going to be looking at some of the ways that analytics can really mess you up with some examples that happened to me and my team. But also how analytics can actually enable creativity, which is a fairly counterintuitive point. But I really believe you can actually use analytics to become more creative in your work. And then finally, the second half is going to be a whole bunch of the experiments that we ran in Bears versus Art, as well as all of the actual results and all of that right there in this talk. So this is a whole bunch of content. We're going to just scream through this. This talk, however, isn't an in-depth breakdown in the actual tools that we use, the analytic implementation, or the way that we do analyses. It's much more kind of high level and about that role of analytics inside both production and design process. So here's the thing. Analytics gets a pretty bad rap, right? Like, we generally consider them tools for money-hungry business people. This is my appropriate image for people going after the coin. And we generally consider it something that people use to optimize profits and things like that. But the thing is people already love analytics. Like, secretly, we already love statistics. When you release a game, I guarantee you're there on the charts, just like me, just like everyone else, hitting refresh, checking where it is, checking the ratings, how many reviews have you got, what's the average score, what's happening, how much did you move in the last 24 hours. We love that kind of stuff. And the thing really is that, like most tools, analytics can both be good and bad. It just depends on how you use it. It can be really helpful and really allow you to do great things, or it can be a massive pain in your ass and really ruin your day. But the thing is analytics do not replace creativity. They can actually enable it, and that's going to be the main point that I keep coming back to in this talk. So as we get started, we just got to do some boring stuff up front. We're just quickly going to go through some basic terminology, just so that people who are new to the topic can get the most out of this talk. So if you guys already know this stuff, then I'm going to have some adrenaline-charged images on the right-hand side of the slides, and you guys just watch that. And everyone else who this is new to, you can listen to me and hear about these definitions. So number one, analytics and metrics and data. Man, this was such a bad idea. This is so distracting. I've rehearsed this heaps of times, and I see this image and my feet begin to tingle, and oh my God, it's terrifying. Okay, focus up. Analytics and metrics and data, they all generally get used interchangeably, and they're all just basically statistics about player interactions in your game. Retention, which we're going to talk about a few times, is simply a measure of whether or not people are coming back to the game. And when you see something like D7 equals 40%, you won't see any numbers that high in this talk, but if you saw something that said D7 equals 40%, it simply means that 40% of the players who installed the game 7 days ago opened the game that day. Didn't play it, didn't do anything else, just opened it that day. And this is classic retention. This isn't rolling retention or anything else like that. Finally, we have one called lapsed players. So these are players who have not returned to the game for 14 days. So this is simply our definition, Halfbrick's definition of a lapsed player. The reason this is a useful definition is because we can't actually say these players have quit the game and will never come back. Because they might. They might come back, next time there's a really big update or whatever, we may re-engage them somehow. But if they've been out of the game for 14 days, then we consider them lapsed players, and there's a great chance that they won't necessarily make it back. And finally, analysis paralysis. Basically getting locked up by all of this data and being unable to do what you really need to do to make this game great. And this happens in 3 ways: through a really strong focus on the data, through a reliance to that data, and being sensitive, overly sensitive to making changes because of the worry about what that will mean for the data. These are the things that are the enemy of creativity, and these are the things that definitely for us early on kind of crippled us through this process. So I'll give a quick, brief history of Bears vs. Art, the game in question. If I ever accidentally say BVA, it's just, that's what we call it internally. It is a little bit easier to say. So Bears vs. Art was originally a game jam that we did at Halfbrick. It's a bit like, it's called Halfbrick Fridays. It's a bit like Amnesia Fortnight and, those quite well-known things. And it was really simple. It's a puzzle game designed to be free to play. Where you're a bear smashing around a gallery destroying contemporary art, because bears hate art. I mean, why not? Ninjas hate fruit, makes total sense. And more or less you pick which direction you want to move, and you'll move all the way along that direction until you hit the wall, and then when you hit the wall, if you reach a piece of art, you slash it up and destroy it, and you have to try and complete these puzzles in a certain amount of moves. So after 1 month, is it working? After 1 month, this was a Flash prototype. Here we go. You can see it basically working there. You roll around, make it to a gallery, make it to a piece of art. And a big part of the challenge is figuring out how to move around the gallery in the most optimal way to reach all of the pieces of art. So you can see the basic mechanics of it here working. There's also these kind of more dynamic action-based elements where there's guests, and then, ninjas as well, and then these highly logical elements such as arrows that change each time you move on top of them and so forth. So we really liked this game. It seemed really good. People inside the office were enjoying playing it. So fast forward 7 months and we made the game. And so this is what it looked like when we finished with it. It's basically the same game. It's a bit loud. Except much nicer. But you can see it basically operates the same way. We added all these really hardcore logical mechanisms as well that allowed us to make really complex puzzles. And some of these puzzles are outrageous. You can easily make non-human solvable puzzles in this game. And so yeah, you get the idea. That's the game. We also added a procedural generated contemporary art thing, and it just busts out endless amounts of abstract art. Sometimes it makes some that are actually pretty good. We wanted to make it so you could order prints. And there's a couple of authored ones in there just for good measure. And finally, we had a whole bunch of analytics hooked up to it. We were tracking all kinds of events, such as, when did you fail a level? How many times did you fail a level? How many moves were you away from being able to complete it? What time of day was it? Everything we can possibly think of. How many coins did you collect? Etc. and so forth. And we soft launched it. We did it on iOS initially in Australia and Canada. And our real key focus that we were looking at was retention. Retention sometimes in a free-to-play called the king of all metrics. And that's because just for a free-to-play game, you really need people to be coming back and constantly re-engaging in the game. So this was the main thing we were looking at. So we soft launched, which leads us right to our first and possibly biggest mistake/lesson. It's only a mistake if you don't learn from it. So we launched it, and these were the launch numbers we got at, and we were immediately worried. Our targets were 45% day 1 and 15% for day 7, and these aren't even really ambitious targets at all. This is pretty modest stuff here. And we couldn't even hit that. Day 1 retention was 38%, and day 7, terrifyingly, was less than half what we wanted it to be. So here's what happened. We go, well, that's okay. We have analytics. This data is going to sort us out. Let's go and look at the levels where people are quitting the game, where it's too hard. We'll make them a bit easier, tweak them around. Let's throw on some classical retention mechanics, things like a daily spin and, sign-in bonuses and all that. And, thank God we have analytics. This problem is basically already solved, right? So 2 weeks later, we roll out that update, and this is us. And we go, it's okay. The data will save us. We're furiously digging through the data, looking at all the analytics, trying to figure out what's wrong, tweaking some more of the levels that we see big, scary spikes on, and, tweaking the daily spin to optimize it, and 4 weeks later, here we are. And then the same thing, and 6 weeks later, here we are. You get the idea. This is us paralyzed by our analysis. And here's the thing, analytics are great at a couple of things, especially, I think, comparing things and exposing some problems. But really, it's only good at surfacing problems you've already anticipated, and that's about it. Because if you haven't anticipated it, you're not looking for it. You probably haven't put in things tracking that other stuff. And analytics are terrible at actually telling you the real problem. And it sure as hell doesn't come back with a chart telling you the solutions. The chart isn't there saying, hey, Luke, you should probably change the control scheme. It just doesn't have that at all. And analytics give you this incredible focus, which then become blinders. It gives you a kind of tunnel vision. You're getting this analysis back. You're seeing these graphs. You see this level where all these people are quitting the game and never coming back. And you go, that's it. This is how we fix it. This is the way to go. But it doesn't show you all the other underlying problems. So we eventually, after quite a few weeks of spinning our wheels, we realized this, and we started to take some steps to overcome this paralysis. We did a whole bunch of things to do this. One of the first things we did was we challenged all of our assumptions. We had all these assumptions that we were bringing into the game that had never been challenged whatsoever. One of them was that the game is laid out on, a saga-style map. You complete one level, then the next level, then the next level. We never even prototyped any other way to do that. And there sure isn't anything in the graph coming back saying, hey, maybe you should try this a different way. So we went back and looked at every aspect of the game and second-guessed ourselves and started going, wait, what if maybe we could change this? And when we wanted to do those changes, we wanted to flip tables. This was the way that we were framing it within the team, was, okay, we've done little tweaky type things before. No, now it's time to get up and really flip over some tables. Because before we were making changes and we weren't even moving the needle. We needed to see where the sweet spots were that would really move the needle for this game. There's not really any point us doing these little tweaks to the levels that make it like 2% easier or 2% harder. If when we go and make it twice as easy or twice as hard, it still doesn't make a difference. We needed to do these really big changes to really find out what was going on and look at those results. Here's like your good 2014 buzzword. We wanted to disrupt everything as well, be really disruptive with our changes. So this was a little graph I drew out which kind of shows all the different aspects of the game, all of the core systems. And we wanted to make changes all over the place, not just in one area, not just like levels like we were before, but really address all kinds of different issues and really see where we were going to get good wins and big, easy wins from. And finally, we would test this by doing split testing. Split testing or A/B testing, however you'd like to describe it. So quite simply, we would roll out these changes to a certain percentage of the players and then compare. See which group is performing better, see which one is retaining longer. And even bad results are lessons. This is what we had to realize. Even if we make a change and it just goes way down, then this is awesome. This actually affirms our previous assumptions. And so once you have this kind of feeling of, I can do anything, and even if it fails, that's actually a good thing because now I've learned something, it gives you this incredible freedom. This amazing freedom to just go wild and go, wow, well, what if instead of having like that world map, we just have a whole list? Because even then, if that makes no change, we go, well, we shouldn't have spent 2 months making all these really pretty maps, should we? We could have spent that time elsewhere. And it really gave us this feeling that we could go crazy and we could go big or go home with our changes. So that was the plan. make big table flipping changes, make 2 of them per week as well. And this is with a team of 6 people. We wanted to make 2 per week and really get stuck into this thing and not screw around. And we wanted to take on risky stuff. We didn't want any safe bets anymore. Previously, we'd done things like, we'll add a daily spin or a login bonus. That stuff's probably going to work. It's going to have some marginal increase. But we can do that later. That can just be icing on the cake when we hit this stuff without it. That'll just be gravy then. And we didn't want to do anything that would kind of obscure the core issues that may be hiding underneath that. And so we had these targets to get our day 1 and day 7 up to 45% and 15% respectively. And also it was important for us to keep that review average at above 4 stars, which is surprisingly tricky during split tests because sometimes you roll out just utter shit. So for us to do this, we had to make some changes to the way we were working, some new methodologies. One of the things was we couldn't do this soft launch on iOS anymore. It was, a really simple equation. You can't roll out a build once a week on iOS. So we switched over to Google Play. And this meant what we could do is we could come into the office Monday morning, come up with 2 tests that we wanted to have executed that week, plan it out. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, implement it. Friday, we put the entire team on QA, and then Friday afternoon, we upload it and hit go. Go away for the weekend, come back Monday, start to look at the results, start to learn from that, and move on. So we had to make this change. We had to roll out a little bit of tech as well for ourselves. Just this really simple, hacky feature manager where we could override variables and add new features and things like that, and then assign them to groups. And then we could put distribution weightings on how likely people were to land in that group. This thing got built in like 2 days. To actually assign people into groups, we're not doing any fancy connect to the server type stuff. We're literally just taking the second hand of the device's system clock and hashing that out. And that's it. We're talking really quick and dirty. And it totally worked great. I don't know who'd want to stuff around with connecting to a server. We also had to have a whole new approach and whole new kind of more hacky, get this thing together and get it out there approach. We couldn't get bogged down in those little tiny details that weren't actually going to make that big a difference to what we would learn by rolling out that test. So this was a new mindset we had to get into. That said, we totally shipped quality features. They always look quite good, and I'll show a whole bunch of them. None of them look really outrageously bad. There's no untextured models, for example, or anything like that. But we just really had to think about what was important in terms of how would we learn. Which details would make a difference to what we would learn from rolling out this test and which ones wouldn't. So that was the process, and we would always come up with a hypothesis first, with some design meets science right here, and then propose a solution, build it, and test it. It was never completely scattershot, like, I wonder if we change this. We always had some reasoning behind it. So we've actually rolled out, I want to say, 28 tests now, because we've been shipping so rapidly, a whole lot of tests. And along the way, we've learned heaps and heaps, not just from those tests, but also about the process. So rather than kind of scatter all through the tests, the lessons about process we made, I'm going to condense this all into one section now, which is our intermission, the classic hits of analysis fuck-ups. And it comes down to 2 main problems. It's really quite simple. Numbers are hard, and humans are stupid. We are not well equipped to deal with this kind of stuff. There are so many cognitive biases at play when we're looking at this kind of stuff. It's just staggering. It's just crazy. And we always have to be really aware of this stuff. Some of it, everyone knows, and everyone here will know, the good old-fashioned correlation is not causality. Pirates do not cause global warming, although that is a pretty nice-looking graph. Those ones we're quite familiar with, but there's all kinds of other things. Another simple one that we kind of stumbled up on early was data context. So this is a graph showing how many players were lapsing at each level. That might be a little bit hard to read up there, but you get the idea. How many people were quitting the game and never coming back, and what level were they up to? Now, this is useful, don't get me wrong. But the problem was at one stage, this started to get used as a measure of just how difficult the levels were. So you can see there's one big spike in the middle there, which is level 37. It's like, wow, level 37 is easily the hardest level in this game. But then we take that same data, and rather than doing it by volume, we changed it to a ratio. And it looked like this. This is the exact same information presented in a different way. This is now a ratio of how many people were quitting on this level and not coming back. And all of a sudden, that spike isn't so big anymore. It's not quite as big a deal, and it shows all this other stuff that didn't even register as a blip previously. So these were all things that we had to learn and get our head around. That said, surprisingly, people were actually pretty good at distinguishing this data and making sense of it. There was kind of a healthy skepticism all around from everyone. I think a big part of that was I always force everyone to go and read Freakonomics, which is a really good book about economies and statistics, and it often shows how we can be totally off base with this kind of stuff. But the actual bigger problem ended up being how people were using, or rather misusing, this data. They were often pretty good at digging through and go, oh, we should look at the, change this to a ratio, or need to consider this, or maybe this isn't directly connected. And then it would kind of get us in all these other soft sort of ways. So I'll give some examples. These are all things that were either said to me or other people in the industry I've talked to, and they've told me they've heard this. Your game has low day 7 retention. It must not be very fun. Wrong. That's ridiculous. That's crazy. If you have low day 7 retention, all that means is your game isn't retaining very well. Retention isn't fun. It could be a factor, don't get me wrong. There could be a factor there. But you can't actually make this leap. You're going all the way from this hard data of someone just opening the app to them saying it's fun. And the example I often use here is Monument Valley. Like, staggeringly good game, but I'll bet it has really low day 7 retention because everyone opens up that game, crushes it for 90 minutes, has a really, really good time, and then that's it. That's what that game is. Retention does not mean it's fun. It just means it retains. That means people are reopening it, and that's it. Of a similar note, people aren't playing this feature very much. They must hate it. We should cut it. Again, terrible. We can't make these leaps. We can't make these things. There's not a graph in there that is a hate meter or a fun meter. We don't see that information. We just see how people are engaging in these features. It could be, like if this is a game mode, for example, it could just be that that button to that game mode sucks. It could just be too small. Players might not be seeing the value there. Once they get in there, they might love it. They might think it's the greatest thing of all time. Just because they're not engaging in it does not mean they like it or dislike it. So these were the sort of things that would often come up. People would grab these data and then kind of attach emotional responses to it and make leaps that way. We ran a sale on in-app purchase pack 3 and sold twice as many of them. That's awesome. Well, maybe it's awesome, but that's really only a small amount of information. This is a data context problem. You could just be cannibalizing all your other in-app purchases. You might actually make less money while this thing is on sale. This is a pretty simple one to overcome, but it's surprising how, again, tunnel-visioned and narrow focus people get when they're talking about this sort of stuff. Some other kind of softer ones now. We should wait until we have conclusive data. No data is ever actually conclusive. We're just dealing with varying degrees of uncertainty, really. In the end, we're making something creative. We're creating a creative game. It's a creative pursuit. There's always an element of risk. You sit around waiting to be sure of every single thing you do, then you're going to make nothing. You're going to get nowhere. You still have to trust your own intuition and make those leaps sometimes. Similarly, our last update was positive. We shouldn't mess with anything too much. Again, bad idea. You can always go back. If this is a soft launch, for example, the whole idea is to mess stuff up. And again, if you keep in mind that bad results is good information, you shouldn't be scared to make those big changes. You can always change it back. That's fine. And especially during a soft launch period, there's a certain degree of expectation that things are going to change around. But this is a really good way to kind of cripple your creative team to not want to go and pursue new ideas and be creative. But game name, insert whatever you like, has 35% day 7 retention. We're doing terribly. I mean, maybe. Maybe they have that, but I don't know. I haven't seen their dashboard. I haven't seen their integration. I haven't seen their code base. I haven't seen the way they're pulling down those queries. Who knows? I mean, maybe it does, and if so, that's great for them, but I would always treat this with a healthy bit of skepticism. I remember someone telling us that their game had 85% day 30 retention, and I'm just, whatever. Like, what are you talking about? There's no way. And of course, they have something to gain by saying how good their game is as well. There's definitely an agenda there. I'm sure there are plenty of people who absolutely tell it straight, but I would just always treat this with a bit of skepticism. And that's cool. You can trust my numbers because no one would lie about numbers this low. Okay, your success or failure is determined purely by these results. This is a really good way to just make your creative team hate what they're doing. In the end, you're making a game for people, not for some blue line on a graph and trying to get some blue line to go up. We can learn a lot from that blue line, but we're not making it for the blue line. We're making it for people. So it's really important to make sure that we remember this. Okay, let's get back to the main event. The plan. Making these big table flipping changes, making 2 of them per week and taking on the risky stuff, no safe bets. All of our tests were really rigorously analyzed. I'm going to give a whole bunch of kind of top level stuff. If you want, I could probably do a 1-hour talk just about each one of these tests. So if you want more information and more in depth on it, come and hit me up afterwards. I'll be happy to talk at length about it. But you just have to trust me that the interesting parts are in this talk. For our retention tests, we have 1,000 players per group, which gives us a plus or minus 2% error. Not perfect, but it's pretty good. And it was always run against a control group. Because we were dealing with such small time frames, like 1-week time frames, we always had a control running at the same time to deal with time pollution. Because there might be a public holiday on in some country that we're soft launched in. And so we get way more people playing that day just because they're not at work or at school. So it was important to always have that control group there. Just a really quick note on UA as well, because I'm sure there's some people here who are really interested. All of our UA efforts, so user acquisition, basically getting people into the game, came from our other games. We didn't really do paid stuff. This has consequences. And again, this is an entire another topic. So again, come and talk to me more about it if you want to discuss more about it. So let's look at some of the focus areas we attacked with this, some of the tests we did. One of our early focus areas was pretty simple. It wasn't that dissimilar from what we were doing before. It was simply the idea that people are getting stuck in the game, and that's probably when they quit, when they can no longer make progress. One of the first tests we tried was this idea of a daily free skip. Really simple, nothing to it. This is like a 2-hour job to get this thing done. People quit when they get stuck, so let's just let them skip a level. And then once they skip a level, we just have technically a 22-hour timer counting down until they can do it again. So if they then burn through a whole bunch of the game and get stuck again and really can't get past it, they can just come back the next day and skip. We'll just let them progress by re-engaging in the game. So let's look at the results. See, this is really fun, at least for me. I hope you guys can tell I'm having fun, because I get to do all these crazy designs, and then it's not like I think it worked out. I can just show like real hard data about whether or not it was a good idea or not. It's not just me guessing. So this is going to be the change compared to the control. So this isn't the normal kind of retention fall-off graph. This shows how much of an improvement or detriment it made to the baseline control retention. So let's have a look. This was huge. We increased our day 7 retention by almost 30%, so 30% on the control, remembering we needed to double it. This was such a massive gain for almost no work at all. It was unbelievable how much this helped. And we could really see how this helped when we started to look at our engagement as well. So this graph here, what you're looking at is the average number of attempts per level before they pass it. All of those grey bars there, for each level, that's the control group, the people that aren't able to skip levels. And then the reddish bars are the people who could skip levels. They were the test group. And you can see on those big spiky levels, those really tough ones, the red bars are significantly lower. It's usually about 20 to 30% lower. So people, instead of getting completely burnt out and frustrated on these levels, were simply able to skip and move along, which was, exactly what we thought would happen, but had a way bigger impact than we had predicted. It was fantastic. So this was a really good big win. So that was one of our early ones. We were just sort of starting to get into the swing of things, and we're like, okay, now we can step this up a notch and do some crazier stuff. Let's look at this progress that we were talking about before. We've always just had it, you have to beat one level and then move on to the next. Again, people can get stuck. What if we make this non-linear? What if we totally change the way that it works and make it so that they can choose what levels they want to play? So we went from this early on in the iOS version to this. This is crazy, by the way. This involved us completely changing our save manager, redoing all of the islands, creating a whole bunch of new tech and a whole bunch of new ways to track this stuff. And the guys on that team got this done in 3 days. It is unbelievable. And so now what we have, instead of it all being laid out one after another, is we have these clusters. You can see there's 5 levels there. 2 of them are complete and 3 of them are not. The blue ones are incomplete. And we just have to beat 1 more before we open the next gate. So once we beat that one, it opens up and shows us the next area. All of them have icons on it too, so you can get a bit of an idea of what kind of level you're getting into. You can go after those puzzle levels or the timed levels or whatever you like. This was really exciting to us. We were having such a good time. It was adding these little sub-goals instead of just, churning through one after another. This is great. We were sure that this was a winner, which always is a bad sign. So this is what our results look like. It is really strange, really up and down, and really messy. And what it doesn't show is day 8 to 14 is a disaster zone. It just absolutely tanks. We spent a long time digging through this, trying to figure out why, and best we can tell, because again, we're just dealing with assumptions and kind of draw connections here, best we can tell what happened is this. People play these levels, they get to the hard one they can't beat, and they're like, screw it, I won't deal with this. They go and hit some of the other ones they unlock. And they keep on doing this process until eventually they get to a point where you just have to beat some really hard levels. Remember, the levels are still getting harder and harder every time. And because they haven't beaten these early hard levels, they're no longer equipped to deal with that at all. And then that's when they really get it. It just kind of defers this process of getting stuck. I think maybe this could have worked if we had have changed our levels, but at that point we're changing 125 levels that we already had authored, and that just was bonkers. This was way too much work, so we kind of abandoned this line of inquiry. But then we tried something similar. We got to reuse a whole bunch of the tech again, and we did this thing called the Daily Island. So this was the idea. We wanted to Sudoku-ify, which was a very technical term, the game. Basically, every single day they would come in, there would be a new island. And there's 8 levels in each island, and they all have a little star difficulty rating down the bottom. So we went through and gave every single level a star difficulty rating based on what we thought. And they could play as many or as few of the levels as they liked, and then each day they would come back, the whole theme would change. It would be on a different island, and the content would be themed about something different. So you can see on the left, this was a day where there was all these lasers, and then the next day, it was all about security guards. It gives you a timer. And, we went all in on this. This was... it would notify you when there was a new day and, when there was new content and everything. And so again, this seemed like a really cool thing, but we're totally changing the game now. These are huge changes to the structure. And so these were the results for the Daily Island. This is a particularly interesting one. At the beginning, it definitely drops off, but it actually slowly begins to pick up come day 6 or day 7. It's really, really interesting, and although the pickup isn't much, it's only, 8 or so percent, 7 or 8%. And kind of the really worrying thing that we saw from this is the engagement. So again, grey being the control, the old version, red being the new version. You can see across the board up until day 7, we're way down. We got a lot less minutes being spent per day on the game because obviously we've totally changed the way that people interact with this. This was a pretty big concern for us, and it certainly outweighed that tiny little blip we got on the day 7. Additionally, this would have been a lot of work. This is like new levels forever. That's quite a debt to get a couple of % gain. So still going down the same line of inquiry, we kind of changed tact a little bit. We wanted to look at the game difficulty. So not just the structure and how you get stuck, but maybe we should just make the game easier across the board and address it that way. One of the things that kept on popping into my mind was the amount of randomness that was in our game. Our game has got a lot of levels where there is a single solution, and you can either beat it or you can't. And there's absolutely, if you can't figure out the solution, that's it. Do not pass go. You can't get any further. And I kept thinking about games such as Bejeweled and Candy Crush, and they're very determined by their random number generator. If you're really stuck on a level, you can kind of keep chipping away at that thing, and eventually you're going to get a lucky roll. And, you know, maybe that randomness would keep people in and keep them engaged for a little bit longer. We already had a bunch of random elements, but only in particular levels. You can see in this level, we had a thing where it actually randomizes your start position. And we also had this element where it was guests that you had to remove. So humans that you had to get rid of because, you know, they're snooty art critics or whatever. And the thing that was good is they were really unpredictable by the way they moved, just like you would expect a crowd of people to be. But not all of the levels had this. So we wanted to create an extra layer of randomness that could sit over the top of all of the levels, especially the really hardcore logical levels. So this is what we came up with. Basically, if you run out of moves, you get a free spin, and maybe you get an extra move. And if you do, hooray, you can finish the level. This was really, really quite a simple thing to do. And it just meant like when you were on those really hard levels, it would give you a chance. If you were missing it by 3 moves, you might actually win 1 move and then fail and you get another spin. So you're talking, you know, 1 in 2-ish and then 1 in 4-ish and then 1 in 8-ish chance of getting past eventually. So these are the results for that. They were pretty mixed as well. It is quite funny seeing these weird spikes around day 5 and things like that. But we got a little bit more of a story when, again, we looked at the engagement of this. And, you know, again, grey control, red the test group. The amount of time people were spending on the app was actually a lot higher, up until about day 7, and then it kind of flattens out. So, you know, there's definitely some value here. I think people seemed to enjoy it. A little tiny caveat there is technically, if you think about it, each time you play a level and then fail, we've added an extra 6 to 7 seconds inside that loop. So it could just be that they're adding 6 to 7 seconds times how much energy you burn through. And then that's accounting for the extra time on app. All right, so a lot of these have been, you know, pretty interesting. Then we just sort of started to go crazy. We were like, how far can we push this thing? How much work can we get done in 4 days, and how wild can we go? So we had this idea called the role-playing bear. My team constantly torments me with horrible puns. And they're like, what's the matter, Luke? Is it unbearable? Oh my God, it drives me insane. So this was the thing we were actually thinking about Diablo. And here's what kind of popped in our minds. Our levels get harder and harder and harder and harder. And in an RPG, so do monsters. But why doesn't it actually get harder? Because your character gets better. So, hey, what if we just build an entire RPG system into this puzzle game and see what happens? So we did that. You can see I now have speed, savvy, intelligence, and cunning. And I'm able to invest skill points into these that'll give me extra moves. We even added, like, you know, we already had costumes, but we made it so you could research costumes and they'd give you stat bonuses, and sometimes you'd unlock, like, legendary items. We went, and again, we got this done in 4 days. This is wild. And the thing that was kind of exciting about it was it gave you a whole heap of new sub-goals as well to work with. And so here was the results of that. Finally, something I liked did really well. It was so exciting, and you know, people were responding to it, and we were keeping an eye on reviews as well, and people were just going bonkers over this thing. Everyone in the office loved it. And the thing that was really exciting was I don't think we would have tried this unless we had that freedom to fail. This put us in this whole mindset of we can go wild, we can go crazy, like how crazy can we go? And I really don't think we would have gotten here any other way. All right, let's talk about energy. This is always a fun topic. Here's the way I've had, I remember someone telling me this, I don't know who to credit this for, I wish I could remember, but energy systems in free-to-play games. I've had it described to me as your game is like a delicious chocolate cake. And if you give someone a whole chocolate cake, here's what's going to happen. They're going to eat half of that cake in one go, and then that's going to make them sick. And then they're not really going to want to eat the rest of the cake. But if you give them one small slice per day, they're probably going to eat that slice every single day and eventually eat the whole cake. Stretched analogy, I don't know, maybe. Generally what I hear from other game developers is people go, well, you know, screw you. I have some self-control. You can give me a whole cake and just trust me to know what intake is good for me. Fair enough. I can totally get that point. Me though, I'm the guy who eats half the cake. I'm the one who gets sick off it and then doesn't eat the second half. So, you know, that's sort of the way that we'd been thinking about it. And Bears vs. Art did have an energy system. And the energy system was pretty similar to something like, say, Candy Crush. Quite simply, if you fail a level, you lose energy. If you fail too many times, then you're out. The thought occurred, if you fail something repeatedly and then the game says, nah, get out. You failed too many times, get out of the game. That's probably actually a pretty bad flow, right? Like if you're getting kicked out of the game at the same time you've been told, you're a failure a whole bunch of times, how likely is it that you're going to want to open up the game again? So this was what we were thinking. Maybe you just always lose energy. Every time you play, you lose energy. Generally, people pass more than they fail. And what this means is they're going to pass a level, feel good about themselves, and then be told, well, you know, come back later for more of those good feelings. This was the way we were thinking about it. And we were pretty sure that, well, this was dicey. And we were pretty sure it would actually drive down engagement. We did a few things to kind of offset that. We gave them a little bit more energy. They get a free refill the first time and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, the team is feeling pretty like this guy at this point. So let's have a look at the results. This is crazy, right? Our retention actually went way up. This was surprising. Again, like 30% on day 7 retention went up. I could kind of feel it myself, though, when I was playing. It's sort of distorted because I know all the solutions to the levels, and I would just burn through to like 20 levels at a time. Finally get stuck somewhere and be like, well, I'm done. The thing that was most surprising about this was when we looked at the engagement, and the average time on app per day by day 5 is actually higher. People were coming in and they were logging more sessions as well and coming back to the game more and more and actually putting in more playtime over time. This is crazy. This was totally counterintuitive to me, and you know that was definitely an insight. Still, you know, even after this and even after I showed this to people, they were like, yeah, but I don't know, man. Energy sucks. What if we get rid of it? I'm like, all right. Let's do no energy at all. This is what the office was like when I said we were removing the energy system. Again, this change, we're talking one line of code. Boom, energy gone. Let's see what happens. I make this one sweep really slowly left to right because it's exciting. So looking good. This totally tanked. It actually goes lower than that, but the way I have like the data set up in the slide means it won't show just how low it goes. But it just absolutely tanked. It is wild. I'm going to just say at this point, this isn't me saying, hey guys, put an energy system in your game, because it's like your guaranteed ticket to success. I'm just saying for our specific game, which is structured the way it is, which has the, you know, the particular aesthetic that it does, the kind of people it appeals to, it really worked out well for us. And it was crazy. It was really not what we expected. We actually have a whole bunch of stuff where if you play the game enough, you can unlock some stuff, you eventually overcome that energy curve. So for the people who are really invested, they can get past that in the end as well. But again, this is crazy. Then we were trying out a whole bunch of other ideas. This was a little bit more scattershot, these other ones we tried. So one of them was fake friends. You know how this works. It comes up, log into Facebook, and it shows where your friends are on the map. Here's the thing, less than 12% of players were connecting to Facebook, and so most of them just had an empty map. So we wanted to give them a little bit more context to their progress, give them a little bit more insight. So this is what it looked like. We did two things. We added fake friends, but we also did this thing where it shows you global statistics on these levels. So, the average player takes X amount of times. Our fake friends actually move around and have little quips and everything as well. This is pretty neat. Like, this is something that you could pretty easily add to most of these styles of games, I think. And they're not even real people, because we thought that'd be weird. Like, no one wants to see the developers in there. We're not that good looking. But we just literally had our other Halfbrick characters. We've got T-Rex and things like that. And this is what happened with that. Just really nice across-the-board pickup. It was really, really crazy. And it's really nice, and it actually does feel good. It is nice having those little goals, like, I'd hate that guy, he looks like a total jerk. We ended up adding a evil version of the bear. That's always right at the end, and when you finally get to him, he skips forward like 20 levels. People hate that guy. It's really cool. There's like this real emotional response to these fake friends. All right, here's one of the last ones I want to go through. The Actionify feature. This is what we were thinking, and this relates to what I was talking about user acquisition before. Bears vs. Art for a Halfbrick game is pretty slow. It's a thoughtful puzzle game. It has action elements, definitely, but it's definitely a lot slower than our other games. Like in Jetpack Joyride, you bust through a wall riding a robotic fire-breathing dragon. And then it's like, hey, how about you carefully consider your spatial environment? So we thought, what if we just made this a little bit more action-y? So this is the old version. This is how it used to play. This is me moving as fast as possible. And then we changed the controls. All we did was tweak some variables. And this is how fast we made it. It's pretty fast. It's pretty over the top. Like, it about quadrupled the time, or reduced the time by about fourfold how fast you could speedrun this game. And so we literally got in there and changed the controls. And this was the result. Again, really, really big uptick across the board. And this sort of brings me back to my main point. Analytics doesn't actually tell you what the problem is with your game, and it doesn't tell you what the solutions are. There sure as hell wasn't anywhere in any of those reams and reams of data that said maybe you should change the controls. Maybe that's one of the big problems. Even when we did playtesting, like traditional playtesting, getting people into the office, approaching people down the street, we had about 50 people in. Not a single person ever said, this feels a little bit slow, maybe it should be faster. Even when we sent it out to every single person in the office and all those people took it home and showed their partners and parents, no one ever said that. And then yet we make that change and we see results like that. Analytics just shows you some of the problems and no solutions. So basically, we went and got a whole bunch of these things, a couple of them, making it more action-y, putting in the no energy refund, adding the daily free skip, and including the role-playing bear. The nice thing was because we'd done all these different sections, these were all non-mutually exclusive. We can add all these things in together, and again, because of the system we set up, it was really easy to do. We just treated these like ingredients, put them all in, and after 6 weeks of work, this was 6 weeks total, this is finally where our retention got to, like the raw retention. So we went from 38% to 50% above our goal, and day 7 went from 7% to 20%. Again, way above our goal. This was great. This was really, really exciting. Since then, we've done a few other tests, which I just really quickly want to show because they're kind of neat and they're interesting. We did this one test where we just changed the shop button. Originally, it was this tiny little shopping cart down the bottom, and then we made it this really big, shiny, animated button. Doubled our monetization. Then we did this other thing, and at the end of the level, when the level complete, we had this nice little, it's just there to be a little point of interest. It shows you the most valuable painting you destroyed and the name of it, and you can tweet it and all that. And we're like, well, this is prime real estate. We can do better than that. We added a little, sale items and things from the shop in there. This actually reduced our monetization by about 40%, which was crazy. The best we can tell, it's because it was bringing the shop out to people, and then people weren't exploring around the shop and seeing all the possibilities and all the different things. It was kind of short-circuiting that system that we'd worked hard to improve. We did this other one test, which took a bit longer than a week, but it's just super cool. We were making content this whole time, and making content is hard. So we thought, hey, what if we just make a system that will procedurally generate levels forever for us? And hell, we'll set it in space. Because why not? So we made this crazy space helix level, and it automatically generates puzzles and determines difficulty. This is it just busting out level after level at the moment. This is about the speed it's able to do it at. We pre-solve every single one of these levels, and then we simply store the... it's all deterministic, so we just store the seed as well as the solution. And then this meant that on the Infinity Island, players can go, that level was too easy or that was too hard, and we totally just serve them up a new random level that fits their desired difficulty. So this was a shit ton of work, and it totally made not a very big difference at all. But I don't care, it's way too cool. It's not going anywhere. I would guard it with my life. All right, oh man, I'm running out of time. A couple of other quick lessons that we learned along the way. Only instrument actionable data. Sometimes early on, we were tracking so much stuff, we'd get one of the analyst guys to go like, hey, check it out. This is a graph of all of the coin spend associated with level, and it'd be this like crazy complex set of data. And it's like, cool, man. I do not know what to do with this information. It's really important to be only tracking and digging into things that you actually know what you'll be able to do. It's good to like come up with a hypothesis. Like if it's really high, that means maybe we could try this. If it's really low, maybe we could try this. It's always good to keep tabs on your reviews as well, because people will go into the reviews and tell you what they like and don't like and what they think should change. It's really important not to forget this stuff. Like reviews are a fantastic source of inspiration and really great ideas. It's really important to keep developers connected to the players. Always thinking about the fact, as I've mentioned previously, you are making this game for human beings that play your game, not for a blue line that's shifting around. And one of my last points is don't dismiss intuition. So here's what we did. We were doing a bit of a revamp of the economy, right? And so we had all this data, crazy amounts of data. And so on the one side, we got an analyst to go through and spend about 4 days digging through it and come up with like the optimal setup for how much should coins cost, how much should you get them, how quickly should you earn them, right? It's great. And also, that person did a great job. On the other hand, this very handsome man on the right is our QA guy, Terry. So Terry has been playing this game 8 hours a day for 12 months. And we said, hey, Terry, how about you rebalance the economy for us? And he did it in like 15 minutes because he was just like, this is too much, this is too little, this is more expensive than it should be, you should change this, boom. When we rolled out both of those, Terry's changes were far more effective and did far better. This is not to diss like the analysts. They come up with a lot of great stuff and they provide all kinds of value to us, but just because it's there in hard numbers doesn't mean it overrides intuition. Terry has like 5,000 hours up on this game, and that means something. Just because he doesn't have data and numbers to back it up, that still means something, and that's really important to remember. All right, some conclusions, because I can hear the other talks wrapping up. So yeah, analysis paralysis, it really comes down to three main things you have to worry about. Getting too focused on the data, being too reliant on the data, having it kind of lead you by the nose where it wants you to go rather than you directing it, and being worried with a sensitivity to change because you don't want to go backwards and you don't want to make mistakes. So don't let analytics replace intuition. Be bold, get creative, get stuck in there, make crazy stuff. It actually gives you this power to really go wild with it. And just always remember that there's no bad results. Even bad results are actually good results as long as you're learning from them every time. And really, I mean, for me, what it's all about is, using every single tool you got to make your game as great as possible. Thanks. Okay, we have some time for some quick questions. If you are too shy to ask questions, you can hit me up on Twitter. I will definitely answer absolutely everything on there. Otherwise, if we're about to run out of time here as well, I'll be over in the room across the hall, so we can always chat then. Yes?
What happened to all the players who were used to playing the game with the early parameters? Do your new builds still support all the old ways of playing the game? Or?
So the way that it worked was, the way that we had it set up is it would always, the game would update, and those people on those old feature sets were still able to play the game, and we wouldn't migrate them into new feature sets because we wanted to keep these, the data coming through as clean as possible. It also meant that our QA guy, when we were shipping a build, would have to test like 20-something versions of the game based on which features were enabled and disabled for other groups. Eventually, once there was barely anyone playing a single track, we would then migrate them over, and we'd mark them as void players because we wanted to keep the data as clean as possible at all times. That was always something we were worried about is, if they play the action version and then we ship them over to something, their expectations are totally skewed and it would make the data a bit dirtier. Thanks.
So if you're doing A/B testing of two features at once, did you ever have on a Friday where you had some people that had both feature A and B? And then how did you interpret the results if that was the case?
Yeah, we always tried to keep it as clean as possible. And I mean, as it's probably obvious from this talk, like it's pretty quick and dirty, a lot of this stuff. Sometimes we'd try combining features, but as a rule, we tried to keep the amount of groups running at pretty low because we did have a relatively low influx of players. So rather than making heaps of variations of anything or combining too many things, we would run like quite distinct groups so that we could really see those changes and try and learn as much as possible from that. We did have a couple of rounds where, as we were building out some of those larger features, such as Infinity Island, we would use those weeks to roll out a whole bunch of like combination tests, and those would kind of reaffirm that we knew those features were performing well and that they would mix well together. Sure. Any other questions?
Yeah, maybe, did you do all of the tests on only new players, or did you do tests on existing as well?
So I think the question was did we only test on Google Play?
No, on new players.
Oh, new players, right, sorry. Yeah, only ever on fresh players would they get in. If we ever detected that they came in from somewhere else, if they'd uninstalled the game and then reinstalled it or anything like that, we'd always give them like the latest and greatest features, but we would tag those players as void. So that we always were trying as hard as possible, and it's impossible for it to be perfect, but as hard as possible to have like really clean data with really fresh players. Okay, great. Well, thanks very much everyone for coming, and if you've got any more questions, feel free to hit me up. Thanks.